Hi, in this video I'm looking at these ratios here and we want to express them in the simplest form. Now the easiest way to do these is treat them as fractions. So 8 is to 10 for our first one can be written instead as the fraction 8 over 10, and we can think about trying to simplify this as a fraction. And to do that, we need to think about what's the biggest number I can divide both 8 and 10 by. Now they're both even, so I can divide them both by 2. Is there anything bigger? Well, 8 can be divided also by 4, but I can't divide 10 by 4. 8 can also be divided by itself, 8, but I can't divide 10 by 8. So let's divide both of these by 2. So if I divide both of these by 2, because they're both even, so I divide them both by 2, this will give me the fraction 8 divided by 2 is 4, 10 divided by 2 is 5. Okay, can I simplify this anymore? Well, 5 is a prime number, so definitely not. So that means that I've got my fraction in the simplest form, so now all I need to do is just write the ratio in the simplest form, which is I take the top number is to the bottom number. 4 is to 5. And that's it. So let's have a look at part B. Part B, we have 1.5 litres is to 500 milliliters. Now, just like with fractions, we need these units to be the same, so I can't simplify this yet. And the best way to go is to bring the biggest unit down to the smallest unit. So we've got 1.5 litres. There are 1,000 milliliters in a litre, so I've got to multiply by 1,000, which gives us 1,500 milliliters is to 500 milliliters. So now I've got them both in milliliters. So now if I write these as the fraction 1,500 over 500, and I want to simplify this fraction. Well, I can look at this and I can go, well, straight away, I can cancel out all of these zeros. 2 zeros line up with 2 zeros, so they cancel out, and I'm left with 15 over 5. And I want to go, can I divide both of these by a number? Well, 5 is prime. So can I divide 15 by 5 is something I should check. Yes, I can, because I can divide 15 by 5 and get 3. So I'm going to now divide both of these by 5. But because I've cancelled out the zeros, I'm really dividing by 500. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So I've got the fraction 3 over 1. So we're going to have instead the ratio of 3 is to 1, but they're both, in this case, really milliliters. Or you could think about it as liters. 3 liters represents 1 liter. The units don't matter anymore once I've converted them both to the same units and simplified the ratio. Lastly, having a look at part C, 0.09 is to 1.5. Now, these two are both decimals, and we don't really like writing our fractions as decimals. And that's going to be our clue in the first case, is to get them to not be decimals. So I've got to pick the one with the most decimal places to convert to an integer. So this one has 2 decimal places. It's got the 0 and the 9. This one's only got 1 decimal place. It's got the 5. So I need to look at this one. What do I need to multiply this by to get this to be an integer? No decimal places at all. Well, I've got to move this decimal point 1 space, 2 spaces, which means I've got to have 100, 2 zeros for 2 spaces of movement. Which means I've also got to multiply this one, because ratios are like fractions. What you do to the left, you must do to the right. So we get the ratio instead of 9 is to 1.5 times 100 is to 150. Now I can think about this as the fraction 9 over 150. What can I divide both of these by? Well, if I divide both of these by, well, let's think. 9 can be divided by 3, or itself 9, and that's really our only choices. 150, well, it can be divided by 3, but it can't be divided by 9. So let's divide by 3. So we divide both of these by 3, and that gives us the fraction 9 divided by 3 is 3, over 150 divided by 3 is 50. And so now if I go and write my answer, that means I've got the ratio 3 is to 50. And that's it. We are done. So the easiest way to simplify ratios is to think of them as fractions and simplify the fraction, and then just write it back as a ratio. You can just do the steps straight away, like here where we multiplied both sides by 100 to get it into integers. I could have just gone, well, 9 divided 3 is 3, 150 divided 3 is 50. I can just treat them straight as ratios, but if I think about them as fractions, the maths works out the same. And another reason for treating them like fractions is it means we can actually use our scientific calculators to help us too. A lot of scientific calculators have a fraction button. And so I can write, say, my first ratio, 8 is to 10, as the fraction 8 over 10. And when I press equals, it'll give me the simplest form, 4 over 5, which is 4 is to 5. I can do 1.5 over 500. And this will not give me a fraction. I can try and get a fraction, but it's not the fraction that I had. And this is because, again, the units were different. So I've actually got to convert the units first still. So I've got to do 1500 over 500, and that will give me 3. But as a fraction, that's 3 over 1. I've just got to remember that if I get just an integer, it means it's over 1, so 3 is to 1. And lastly, 0.09 over, whoops, I didn't get the decimal, 0.09 over 1.5 gives us the decimal 0.06. Hit the SD button, we get 3 over 50, 3 is to 50. So treating them as fractions is also a nice way of being able to use our calculators to help us as well.